thank you so much for joining us for this extended policy briefing launch from Evidence to Action, Class Inequality, Workforce Sustainability and Workforce Wellbeing in UK television. It's such a pleasure to welcome such a strong mix of colleagues from across policy, industry, academia and the wider sector. My name is Beth Johnson. I'm a Professor of Television and Media here at the University of Leeds, and alongside my co-author on the briefing, Anna Theodoulides, and our partners at the Film and TV charity, we're really delighted to welcome you. So to briefly outline the format for today's launch, I'm going to begin with a short overview of the research context and key recommendations from the briefing. So that'll take maybe about 7 minutes, and then we're going to move into a panel discussion with 5 brilliant speakers who I'm going to introduce in just a few moments, and who are bringing perspectives from across workforce representation, industry, production and sector development. And we'll do that until about 11:40. And at that point, we're also going to open up to audience questions for the remainder of the session. I've just got a couple of brief housekeeping points before we begin. So firstly, and as a reminder, today's session is being recorded and that recording will be circulated afterwards. If you're happy to leave your cameras on, it's really lovely to see your faces. Secondly, as we move through the next 40 minutes, if a question occurs to you, please do post that in the Q&A a bit feature of the webinar. If you want to introduce yourselves or make a general comment, you can absolutely use the chat for that. But questions in that Q&A, that would be lovely. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. Oh, thank you for the screen share. Okay, so to put the evidence that's informed the policy briefing into context, for the last 2.5 years, I've been principal investigator on the AHRC-funded research project, What's On? Thinking Class in the television industry. And we've been very privileged to work in partnership with the BBC and Channel 4, and really closely with my co-investigators, Dr. Laura Miner from the University of Salford and Professor Dave O'Brien from the University of Manchester, and postdoc fellow Anna Theodoulides. So that project brings together production interviews, audience focus groups, textual analysis, so it's end-to-end into anonymous TV dramas to examine basically who produces television drama, what gets made, and how class is represented and understood. And while class is a central focus, our research is also really attendant to how class identity operates alongside other identity characteristics, such as race, gender, disability, and region, for example. If we can go to the next slide, that would be brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay. So today's briefing has been developed in collaboration with the Film and TV charity, and I'd like to acknowledge the importance of that partnership. It's been really important, particularly the opportunity, I think, to bring together in-depth qualitative research from What's On with large-scale workforce and wellbeing data from the Film and TV charity's Looking Glass survey. So the policy briefing, the embargo has lifted. It is now available to download, and the link to access the full briefing is on the slide here, and it's also in the chat. But before we move to the panel discussion, I want to outline very briefly what bringing those two bodies of research together have allowed for and evidenced. So if we could go to the next slide, that would be lovely. Thank you. So the UK television industry is currently facing a convergence of pressures. We're seeing growing concern about workforce sustainability, increasing evidence of poor mental well-being, and clear signals that people are considering leaving the industry, as well as people struggling to get work. At the same time, there's a sustained sort of policy and industry attention on representation and authenticity and public value. And what our research suggests is that these issues can't be understood separately. So the key argument of this briefing, in some ways, is quite straightforward, and that is class inequality in television is not only an access issue, it's a workforce sustainability issue. So recent policy and industry interventions have focused on access and participation and skills development, and those interventions absolutely matter. And in some areas, they've produced change, which is great. But what remains less developed is sustained attention to retention, progression, and workforce sustainability and working conditions, because getting in is not the same as being able to stay. That distinction matters because unequal exit from the industry reproduces inequality just as powerfully as unequal entry. So drawing on the What's On research alongside the film and TV charities Looking Glass survey, we identify a sort of consistent pattern across television production. Working conditions including long and unpredictable hours, insecure and freelance employment, informal recruitment practices and processes, a lack of consistent mentoring and uneven access to progression shape who's able to build and sustain a career in the industry. And crucially, these pressures are not evenly distributed. So those from working class backgrounds are more vulnerable to financial insecurity, less able to absorb periods without work, more vulnerable to unequal progression and exit from the industry. If we could move to the last slide, that would be brilliant. Thank you. So to explain this, the briefing introduces the concept of classed risk distribution. And this refers to the unequal organisation of financial, temporal and emotional risks across television production. So the key point really is that risk routinely is transferred onto those least able to absorb it. And that has really significant consequences: poorer mental well-being, increased insecurity and isolation, stronger intentions to leave the industry, and the loss of skills and talent from the workforce. So mental health here is not an individual issue. It's a structural outcome of how work is organised. But it's not just a workforce issue. So one of the things the wider What's On project demonstrates is that production cultures absolutely shape representation, and audiences notice this. So questions of class increasingly shape audience trust, perceptions of authenticity and broadcaster legitimacy. So those questions matter not only for equality and well-being, but for public value and the long-term sustainability and legitimacy of UK television itself. So the briefing therefore identifies a series of evidence-based recommendations that can be delivered mostly through existing regulatory funding and commissioning levers, and they include and there's much more detail in the briefing itself, but strengthening progression tracking beyond entry schemes, increasing transparency in recruitment processes, embedding structured mentoring and progression support, and making working conditions more viable and measurable. So one important point is that many of the levers needed to address these issues already exist. And the challenge is using them more systematically, not only to widen access, but to support retention and progression and long-term workforce sustainability. That is the end of the slides, the end of the little overview. Thank you very much. And with that in mind, I want to sort of transition across to our lovely panel now. So one of the things we wanted to do today was bring together perspectives from across the sector, from unions, from industry, policy and practice, to explore what meaningful change might look like in response to the briefing. And we're absolutely delighted to be joined by our panelists today who bring a breadth of expertise and experience to this discussion. So Philippa Childs, Head of Bectu, thank you so much for being here, Philippa. Marcus Ryder, OBE, CEO of the Film and Television Charity. Thank you, Marcus. Lesley Gannon, General Secretary of the Writers Guild of Great Britain. Thanks so much, Lesley. Johnny Owen, producer extraordinaire, co-founder of Build Your Own Films, and much more. Many thanks, Johnny. And Sarah Gregory, Head of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion at Creative UK. Thank you all. You are so welcome. And we really appreciate you being here. I'd love to start, if I may, with a brief question for the whole panel. So we're sort of looking for a response from all panel members, nice and short-ish and sharp. And the opening question's this. So the briefing argues that class inequality in television is not only an access issue, but a workforce sustainability issue. So from where you sit, why does that distinction matter now? And I'm going to go to maybe Lesley. You're the first of our lovely panelists on my screen, so I'm going to start with you, if I may. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Now is really important, because what we've seen over the last couple of years is a real contraction around continuing drama in particular, which was often the place that many writers started out. It gave them their first opportunities. So we've either lost a lot of those shows, or we've seen the number of episodes or whatever contracted. So there are fewer opportunities, and that matters. And what also matters right now is we're seeing the impact of AI on some of the secondary work that many writers rely upon in order to sustain those gaps between the writing work. And as that contracts, it makes it harder for people just to support themselves. And I think it's reaching a bit of a crisis point right now.
Thanks so much, Lesley. Thank you. Marcus, I'm going to come to you next. You're next on my screen.
So I've always seen class as a really good indicator of inclusion. We talk about diversity, and diversity is often seen as headcount with regards to protected characteristics, whereas seeing inclusion as to whether you have the social and cultural capital, whether you have those networks, whether you have that the different tools at your disposal to sustain a career and stay in. So that's how I see the fundamental difference. And I think sometimes we make the mistake of seeing them as one and the same. And then also the intersectional work, which your report is absolutely fantastic, highlights is also really important. The one thing that I know you said for me to be really brief, one thing I would say is that we have to look at the change to a freelance workforce. Because if you look at the leaving rates of the BBC, and the BBC have the best stats with regards to class, if you look at the leaving and voluntary and redundancy, there isn't that much difference between people from state education. There's massive difference in the actual total number of get in, and working class people are massively underrepresented at the BBC and other media institutions. But in terms of the leaving rates, there isn't that much difference. If anything, the leaving rates of working class people is less, and I think that's really important. It might be because, they know that if they actually leave, but that's for staff. So I think there's a real issue that we need to talk about with regards to the precarity of working class people in a freelance setting as well. Sorry, I've really gone on, and I should hand over. But yeah, it's really brilliant work, and it's provoked a lot of thoughts for me to talk about. And already I'm talking too much, so I'll hand back to you, Beth.
Thanks, Marcus. No, it's great to have your thoughts. I'm going to go to Johnny, and then to Philippa, and then to Sarah. So I'm coming to you next, Johnny.
Yeah, thanks very much, guys. Lovely to be here, and kind of agree with everything you've said. I am I suppose, a tick box working class lad. My father was a miner. My mother was a housewife. I went to a comprehensive. I come from Merthyr Tydfil, which has been in the news this week, as you've seen, because it's one of the oldest labour supporting areas in the country under real attack. I use the word from reform. So I'm a classic example of somebody working in the media from the kind of background that, you know, you're trying hard to promote. What's interesting and what I sort of want to bring to the conversation is the regional background that I come from, which is gone now. I started working at HTV. I was taken on from an advert in a newspaper, sat for an interview and got taken on and spent, it sounds incredible now, I spent 6 weeks in drama, current affairs, sports, docs, light ends and news, and then was picked to go to certain areas. That's my background. That's what I did. That was what was available to me in the mid-90s, and hundreds of jobs. HTV just quickly was started. It was given the license, and Richard Burton, Stanley Baker, people like him gave money and their reputations to start in a regional channel. These are people who were famous on a world stage. And my argument is always going to be, you know, you can call it paternalistic, philanthropic, I don't care. We need more voices saying that we have to halt this idea that it's always about money. Somebody just mentioned brilliantly, you know, the sort of the demise of drama. What we need is people with voices, important voices, influential voices saying, actually, this is not about the never-ending chasing of money, accountants coming in saying this and that. It's about basing things in areas where people from different genders, different colour, different class, whatever you want to call it, have opportunities. And the opportunities have gone. And we almost need the government to step in and say, we need to stop this and we need to put opportunities out into different areas so that we allow these people to come in. Because I'll end it by saying, some of the most famous people who've contributed, I hate the word soft power they use, I hate it, hard power I call it. Britain's reputation around the world came through our culture, music, film, art, writing. It's so important to us, and it's been slowly run down because people have allowed decisions to be made, and other people now need to speak up and say, actually, we need to do this for these cultural reasons, for our history. I'll end by saying, still, one of the most popular things in the BBC and ITV are the archives. Netflix, Amazon, whatever you want to call them up, they don't have archives. They won't do newsreels. In 30, 40 years, they won't have records like these channels have once done. That's why I think this is so important, and all the conversations you have are important.
Thanks so much, Johnny. And we're going to come back to you with another question about sort of region and regional ecosystems in a little bit, but much appreciated. Thank you. Philippa, may I come to you next?
Yes, thank you. And I also want to say what a great piece of work, really focusing in on this challenge, and what it does chime with is some of the research that we've recently been doing about precarity in the industry and how many people are working, and we've been tracking that over the last 18 months to 2 years, because as we all know, it's a really difficult time in the industry. And what that research consistently has said to us is, if you're from a minority group, but also if you're working class, then you're much more likely to be out of work at the moment. Precarity is higher, the opportunities are fewer, and you're more likely to be considering leaving the industry. So I think I'm just repeating the challenges, but I think we all recognise there is, along with the precarity that comes with being a freelancer working in film and TV, there is a particular challenge for working class people, and for all the reasons that you've described. I'd maybe say in relation to employees and the comments that Mark has made about people being less likely perhaps to leave on redundancy, I do wonder whether that's to do with the fact that there has been a more recent drive to recruit more working class people into the BBC, and actually the people that are probably leaving are likely to have been there for longer and probably aren't necessarily from a working class background. I suspect that is probably the fact. But yeah, all of this precarity, we all know, don't we, that, you know, it's really difficult to sustain yourself at the beginning of your career, and if you're working class, you don't have the bank of mum and dad to support you, then the opportunity for you to be able to move to London, survive, are going to be really challenging, and conditions at the moment definitely are making it more difficult for working class workers.
Yeah, many thanks, Philippa. One of the terms that we use in the policy briefing is the precarity penalty, but hopefully we might have time to talk a little bit more about that. But thank you so much. Last but not least, for this quick fire bit before I'm going to do some directed individual questions, Sarah, can you share your thoughts?
Can excuse me. Oh, good morning, everybody. I'll try and be super quick. Also, I guess for me, because I do a lot at the kind of entry stage and supporting the kind of pipeline and talent, there are a couple of things. Because you said, is it more important sort of access or sustainability? I think it's both. So representation is the key and most important thing here, and it's a societal issue, not just an issue for television. So super important. Access, because for me, I'm always super concerned by the idea that working class people, in order to even get in the most basic roles within television and the wider screen industries, you're looking at £60,000 plus for a university degree to get you a fully vocational career. Honestly, why? Honestly, TV, if you want to be a cameraman or a lighting technician, if you want to go into any of those trades, there are much better ways for engaging with and supporting working class talent into the industry. We are woefully poor on apprenticeships, and those are the kind of things that we really need to shake up and solve. And then on sustainability, I mean, it's everything for us. So diversity is the lifeblood of the creative industries, and working class people are one of the largest diverse groups in the UK. We know that television audiences, the number of shows that pull over 1 million, less than half it was 10 years ago. The number of 16 to 24-year-olds watching television, under half of them. So if you want to sustain and grow and have any future for the traditional broadcast type of television that a lot of this conversation is concerned by, then you really, as an industry, have to start thinking about how you engage, access, and provide opportunities and outputs that serve the whole of the UK community. And like I said, working class people are pretty much the largest part of that community. So that's it for me.
Thanks so much, Philippa. Very much appreciate that. Wouldn't entirely agree about the university element, but it's all interesting, isn't it, to like bring all this evidence together. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask some directed questions to all of our panel members individually. So I'm going to start, if I may, with Philippa. Philippa, one of the clearest findings in the briefing is that working conditions can reproduce inequality, and you've definitely touched on this in your previous answer. But from Bectu's perspective, what changes in working practices would make the biggest difference to who's able to stay and progress in television?
Yeah, I mean, quite topical this week because we've been campaigning around long hours working, and particularly broken turnaround, which is a real problem for many of our members working in film and TV. So yeah, I think there are a number of things that could make a difference. Definitely ensuring that people are working hours that are sustainable, absolutely. Definitely. I mean, and this is a challenge for us. I've got to be honest. In reading your report, and I go back to this quite often. Lots of our members are the hirers, so they are the people that are going back to the people that they've worked with before, that they feel comfortable with, that they know, and perhaps don't advertise. Well, quite often don't have the time actually to advertise more broadly, more publicly, and there is a bit of a tendency to go with who you know, and we know that means recruiting in your own image in lots of occasions. So I think this is something that we have tried to look at in a diversity action plan that we are developing at the moment, and hopefully will make a difference. And we've got to encourage our members to be a bit more wide ranging in terms of who they're looking at, for absolutely sure. So I think those are just two things that would make a real difference. One of the things I wanted to just mention, I'm sure Marcus will as well, is some of the work that Action for Freelancers is doing at the moment, which is looking at things that would potentially make freelancers' lives better, including this piece of work around when you can contact people outside of normal working hours, and I think that would be a really important piece of guidance when it's complete.
Oh, thank you very much, Philippa. I was having a conversation with Action for Freelancers yesterday and agree, incredibly important work, going on there. Thank you so much. You mentioned that Marcus is likely to want to input on this. The next question was for you, Marcus. So that was very neat. So Marcus, the briefing draws on film and TV charity evidence showing the relationship between insecurity, financial pressure, and well-being. How should the industry understand mental well-being, mental health, not as an individual issue, but as something shaped by workforce structures?
Well, you only have to look at the stats that the Looking Glass survey produces, that the film and TV charity does every 2 years. It goes, next one goes live on Monday. So anybody working in television, please fill out the Looking Glass survey. We need to get a high response rate, at least over, we always aim to get over 2,000. We got a lot more than that 2 years ago. So please, 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 I'm sure I'm going to repeat it again, to please fill out your Looking Glass survey. Goes live Monday. But I think the way that we need to think about mental health and well-being is that the survey shows that the numbers are absolutely staggering compared to the rest of the population. So you have suicidal ideation rates of running at 30% in the last 12 months, where if you look at the general population, those figures are closer to 6%. So there is clearly something going on in the industry. So it needs to have an industry-wide, policy response. I think what's really interesting as well, and what's great about your work and the recommendations that you give, is that it is possibly, and the work that the charity is doing, it's possibly the best argument as to why we have to look at these issues through an intersectional lens. Because while class is incredibly important, what we see is that when we look at it through an intersectional lens, class and gender, you see massive, really statistically significant changes to people's poor mental health, running at like 10 percentage points difference. Same with race, and same with other protected characteristics. So I think that while class is important to look at in and of itself, it is really interesting to look at it through an intersectional lens, or else what you end up doing is, and so what we need to avoid doing is having this binary of thinking, is class important, or does class trump race, or does race trump class? What we realize is that these are factors that compound and amplify the problem. So it's not is one more important than the other. It's what are these compounding factors, and that's what the results of the Looking Glass survey find. But also in your report, you report really well on that intersectionality. So I think that's something that I would really want to stress.
Yeah, many thanks, Marcus. The intersectionality is so important, and actually the nuance of that gives us so much more information about some of the huge challenges that we're sort of looking to address here. And I would echo the sort of request for any colleagues on this briefing today who are working in the industry. Please do fill out that Looking Glass survey.
Sorry, just one other point is that if we look at class and LGBTQ mental health and well-being, and also if we look at class and neurodiversity, if we look at that intersection. Now, the reason I really wanted to mention LGBTQ is because invariably people think that there isn't a problem with regards to LGBTQ in television. They think, there's the stereotype that the entertainment industry is full of gay people, right? And so that's why it becomes not just about representation, because that can just be a headcount issue. Is that once you overlay class on things where you actually identify problems, that you might not have realized if you only look at the issue, at these individual issues. So sorry, I just had to mention LGBTQ. I forgot, and I had it down in my notes that I really wanted to mention that.
No, absolutely, and thank you very much for mentioning that, Marcus. Lesley, I'm going to come to you next, if I may. And it's very much linked to what we've been discussing so far, Lesley, but creative careers often look quite open from the outside, but progression can be opaque and uneven. For writers in particular, what barriers still shape who gets to build a sustainable long-term career?
Thank you. And there are so many different aspects to this this whole piece of work. One of the things that I really liked about the report was the way in which the recommendations found areas that touched on all those different aspects and all those different roles. Writing is a particularly tricky one here. It's really important because we're talking about whose stories get told. How authentic are these stories? When we see working class characters represented on screen, who is getting to tell those stories and create those characters? And there's always been there's a kind of mythology that, you know, talent will out, cream will rise, that, you know, you pitch your stories and away you go if they're good enough. But actually finding somewhere to take your story is really difficult. And it gets increasingly difficult if you don't have access to professional networks of people who are already in some way connected to the industry. And this is where that family wealth, access to additional funds is really makes a difference for writers, because in the sort of funding networks of the ecology, writers can't access funding very often. That has to happen through producers. So you have to be able to find an agent, you have to be able to find a producer, and then you have to know how to approach them in the right way. So it's not as easy as kind of Googling some producers and then you can find them. There are incredible levels of unspoken rules. And I think if you're not from someone, you haven't got a way or someone who's going to give you that information, it's really hard to find. And that is one of the problems that we've got. And what that has done and how this is being compounded is that it is driving, and we've seen it, and we've seen the disruptive impact that it's had, is this surge of user-generated content, where people put their stuff out on any platform that they can. Now, user-generated networks and platforms, and YouTube and other ones like that, you know, it's really easy to put your material on there. It's really hard to make any money out of it. And people don't recognize that the content that they're creating has value, and it has a monetary value to the companies that are using it. And so that way of actually converting, having your talent, having your stories, having your ideas, but being able to make any money out of them as a writer is entirely dependent on your ability to navigate a system of dead ends, unknown corridors of networks, and how we break those down in a way that does not then expose people to those who would seek to financially exploit that vulnerability is a real issue, because there are then people, it then becomes who thinks that it's okay to pay for access to a producer, who thinks it's okay to pay for access to script notes. And so it starts to compound and exploit those writers' situations. So we need to break some of that. And I think the calls around transparency, those changes to the ways in which work is submitted, how opportunities are advertised and are dealt with, is absolutely key to this. Thanks so much, Lesley. I know when
we were having a pre-chat, and also the pre-conversations I'd had with Johnny, you know, some of these issues come up again and again, particularly around exploitation and where, you know, where things are being monetized, essentially, that are trying to link to power. Johnny, I want to come back to the focus that you were talking about earlier in relation to region and about regional ecosystems. I think there's such, you know, important work to be done there. The briefing highlights the importance of regional and sustainable production ecosystems. From your experience, and you've talked about what was on offer to yourself, what needs to happen so that talent, particularly talent outside of London, can build careers locally rather than feeling that they have to relocate to succeed? Oh, sorry, Johnny, I think you might be muted. Don't worry.
Yeah, just to say it first, really, just to agree with what everybody's saying here. It's this stuff that, you know, I've been talking about for years, really, you know, and I think the big thing that, you know, I think what everybody agrees with is opportunity, isn't it? And then equality of opportunity, you know, nobody can argue with that, but, you know, it's very, very difficult. And that opportunity for me, as I say, was on a regional level, and that just doesn't exist anymore. And this is my big point of the one change in my generation. Those hundreds of jobs in all parts of the media, in front of the camera, behind the camera, have just gone. That pathway has gone. And I think it's brilliant, all the things you're saying, as well as it's really hard to explain to people, isn't it, how intimidating London is for a start. If you're from somewhere like Merthyr, but first go there to sort of like navigate this world of, like you're saying, producers and peoples. And if you've got this little idea as a writer, where you go, who you speak to, what's out there, so many people find that so difficult. And, you know, the reason why I was such a huge fan of the regions and why I think it was important that I came through, it was step by step for me. You know, but if I could just give a great example, is when you walk through the foyer in HTV, there were obviously photographs there of people like Burton and Stanley Baker, but Catherine Zeta-Jones is up there in a studio when she was a kid. Rob Brydon was up there. Ruth Jones was up there. They all start there. You know, so there's this pathway and this opportunity, as we keep coming back to, that's there, and you can kind of grow through that. And you could think, well, people speak in my accent, you know, people are, and then, you know, you get to a certain point, for argument's sake, as Lesley says, as a writer, you could be writing for the regions, and suddenly you get writing for network. That was the big thing. And so you could see this pathway. Football talks about this great, isn't it? Where it goes, you have to see the opportunity, you know, of finding a youngster and finding their way. In the arts, which Vicky is brilliant at, we don't do this. We don't find our best talents and go, right, where can they be from? You know, is it a young black girl from a council estate in North London? Where is her opportunity? Where is she ever going to think that she can write something for television? It's almost impossible. You know, it's the same for me, you know, thinking about it now. When we as our company, we put out our sort of, company was formed, we had a lot of press. We want to tell working class stories of working class writers. So we went through this whole progress of finding these some fantastic writers from places like Manchester and, you know, Scotland, and we pitched these ideas. Vicky McClure is my wife. People call her a green light actress, right? That famous expression, right? We took all these things. We haven't got one single commission so far. Not one. This is Vicky McClure going into these commissioners, and, you know, we come back. There's a brilliant expression that Beth used, you know, from the kitchen sink to the kitchen island. And if I see another drama of a middle-class couple having an existential crisis because one's having an affair, I'll scream, you know, because the stories that the working class ones are just not out there anymore, because the pathway's not there and the opportunity's not there. And all this stuff that we're talking about is so important. And where I always come back to the regions was, I started on a drama series called Nuts and Bolts, which was made for HTV. Eve Miles got her first job on that. She's a huge, well-known TV actress. Phil John was a director, gone on to do loads of things. He's great talking about this. That's all gone now. So how do we talk about pushing things back into the regions? The BBC do talk about it, and they, you know, there's an idea that sort of Wales love his moment, and Manchester, and we all know the Channel 4 went up to Leeds for a little bit. But if we think of what was there 30 years ago, you know, and I always end this argument by saying to people, and I always got, never realised that, Coronation Street, which is probably the most successful TV show ever, let's say, the longest one in soap, was a regional show that started on Granada in Manchester for, I think, 18 months, 2 years before it went network. That wouldn't get made anymore. So we have a problem in this country where what was there and our pathways, our opportunities, all the stuff we've spoken about, you speak about brilliantly, are gone. So who do we speak to about allowing these opportunities to start up again, and how do we do that? In a different world, I completely understand what you're saying. Is we've lost a younger generation, there's YouTube and all these things, but they're still out there. If you make the stuff they want to watch, they will definitely watch it. Get the writers in that talks about their lives, they will watch it. I guarantee that, because we all see it. So how do we do it?
Thank you so much, Johnny. I could see Marcus raising his hand, I think in response to one of your points. So if it's all right, I'm going to ask Marcus just to speak for about 30 seconds, and then because I don't want to miss going to Sarah for her question. Does that sound okay?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. Oh, Marcus, you're muted, sorry.
I think this proves why class is so important, because what would normally happen at this point is a BBC commission would come on and actually point out the fact that more commissions are in the nations now than previously, having worked in Manchester in '93. But what it is that when you use the example of footballers, you couldn't have regional footballers if they didn't have staff contracts. They've got staff contracts for their football teams. You had staff contracts for Coronation Street.
Yes.
Right? And so that's why the class analysis, when otherwise you find in these debates, you get completely sidetracked, because you know what the living reality feels like. And we can see it, and everything you say is correct, Johnny, but then you end up having these conversations with BBC or Channel 4 commissioners who will point to you with stats trying to disprove the very reality that you're living. So I just had to add that. That's why I think the class analysis or the class prism is so vital in these things.
No, and do you know what's funny? I'll make you all laugh here. My father worked underground. He was an electrician, right, all his life. When I got the staff job at HTV, he was so delighted because he was born before the Second World War. My grandfather grew up in the Depression. A job for them was everything. And he'd be like, oh, well done, son, you got a job. All the departments shut down. It was just a news service. So I went freelance. Bless him, he died 10 years ago. He went to his grave going, oh, what are you doing for work and money? And I go, I'm okay, actually, I've got 3 months on something. He go, 3 months? Only 3 months? Oh, he thought I was constantly living. And his attitude towards freelance was the attitude you're all saying. He was constantly going, how do you manage? And this is why everything you say about mental health and all that, me having that job for almost 10, 12 years at HTV set me up. I knew I was going to get paid. I went through all different departments. I got fantastic experience. I worked in different avenues about media. I was well paid and I had brilliant people around me. I came out the other end. That's all gone now.
Thank you. Thanks, Johnny. Thanks, Marcus. I mean, such important discussions in relation to pathways, but in relation to contracts, really, really important. Yeah. I do want to come to Sarah, if I may. Sarah, the briefing sort of argues that many solutions can be delivered through levers that already exist. So from a sort of sector development perspective, where do you see the biggest opportunities to turn evidence like this into practical change at scale? We've got about 3 or 4 minutes, and then I'm going to open up for audience questions. And I know that's a big question, so I'm sorry, but I'd love to hear what you can share about that.
Sure, Beth and all. I'm just going to actually start where Johnny left off, because I think, Johnny, what you just illustrated is the huge gulf between my aspiration and the reality. So interestingly, I was going to lead with what's out in the ecosystem and why is it not working. I'm going to go on a little bit of a journey here, but I'm going to start with something that Johnny will know really well then. The TV Workshop in Nottingham, right?
Yes.
So TV Workshop is the UK's best, by far, working class development opportunity for TV and wider screen talent. It has turned out talent like Vicky McClure, but others, of course, Joe Dempsey, Bella Ramsey, you go on, I mean, literally miles and miles and miles. This is an organisation that demands grassroots level funding, and Alison struggles day in, day out just to keep the lights on. How is this even possible in an industry that earns £149 billion a year? And I'll give you something to compare it to. So I'm doing a lot of work at the moment with the Premier League and trying to learn from them and what we bring into our sector. Their GDP is a quarter of ours, but they put just into this type of work, not grassroots football, grassroots community work, £125 million a year just from the Premier League, not the Football Association, Premier League alone. So really, I'm going to firstly say shame on you, TV industry, because you're not even managing to sustain your most important entry opportunities. So that's where we start there. Other things that were also mentioned around the universities and the language, the hidden language that Lesley spoke about. Oh my gosh, this also drives me mad. Young people sit at university for 3 years, they come out at the end and they don't know this basic stuff. Most of universities are full of people who've worked in the sector. So Why is there so much difficulty in translating their experience into their students? That's another issue that I've just heard. But there are some things in the ecosystem I think could help. One of the things for me that's really important coming up that we're going to be leading on is trying to map pathways into through the creative and cultural industries. And it's a massive project, but we're going to start somewhere, and we've got some money through Discover Creative Careers for the next 3 years to begin this work. And what we want to do is find out for an unnetworked person, how do you get in a job, A, B, but actually for us, we're really interested in seeing where are those gaps. So actually, where is that pipeline actually broken? Because we think we'll find more broken pathways than actual firm pathways. And then in the third year of this work, what we want to do is put some stimulus into filling those actual gaps. So making a way that we take those journeys, whether it's through formal education, apprenticeships, community-driven education. There is a lot of attention to this across the UK. There are career hubs developing in most MCAs. We have brilliant creative universities, literally the best in the world. We do have apprenticeships, and we also do have the potential of models for apprenticeships that could work better for our sector. What we're not getting is the just shaking of the tree to make all these happen. And I know we're short on time, so I'm just going to finish on one thing. I'm going to cut the course in this, but I'm going to say just cut the rubbish, because we know that there are really great access and entry organisations, including universities across the UK. Yet our employers constantly tell us they can't reach this talent, or they're going to use my network because it's quicker and simpler. These organisations have put their processes in place to make it quick and simple for you to recruit through them. Just do it, right? It's not that complicated. People are out there trying so hard to talk to you as a sector, to engage you with the talent that's out there across the UK. Make the effort to talk to them. I'm going to finish it there. Thank you.
That's brilliant. There was so much in that, Sarah. Gosh, it'd be so nice if we had much longer today to go further into depth. But so far, in terms of this panel, we've covered working conditions. We've thought about well-being, regional pathways, creative careers, systems level change. I'm going to move on to audience questions in just a moment, but I just wanted to mention that we have placed a really short impact survey in the chat for people who have come to find out more about the policy briefing to hear this panel, because this forms part of a wider programme of research and policy engagement. We would hugely appreciate you taking a couple of minutes to complete that if you're able to. It really makes a significant difference to helping us evidence the reach and value of this work. But I'm going to pass to my colleague Anna now, who has been looking at the Q&A. Anna, can you maybe share the first Q&A question? We've got 11 minutes, so we'll hopefully get 2 or 3 questions in. We're going to have to keep them short and sharp.
Yes, thank you. So we've got a question from Philip, who asks, how do the panel see BBC charter renewal factoring into this conversation? Is it an opportunity to force positive change? Or given the political landscape, is it already too late to make the case for public service broadcasting?
Thank you so much, Anna. It'd be great to just get a few reflections on that from the panel. And thank you for the question, Philip.
Can I jump in?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Sorry, please do, Philippa.
Yeah. So my answer to the question is yes, of course. In this whole discussion and debate, the BBC is so important. They are the one organisation that have introduced lots of apprentices, and it's a really important way for completely over subscribed, but they are doing it, and they're doing it consistently. I certainly hope it's not too late to make the argument for public service broadcasting. I hope we all agree that the BBC is one of the most important public institutions we have in this country, and we must make sure that we fund it properly and that it's sustainable into the future.
Thanks so much, Philippa. I don't know if anybody else would like to pick that up. We'll maybe just take one more
The
panel
only thing I
members.
would add, and I don't think it came through strongly enough at all in the review, which is mandating regional production. So really, I know it came through in the last version and it is in there, but I think even in our conversation, Beth, and I know it's Channel 4 and not BBC, but the idea that we push things out and then we don't really make anything of them, you know, the Channel 4 building with no sign on it, those kind of just really things that fail to show the aspiration to the regions where we share the work.
And
I think I would also.
Oh, go on. Sorry, Lesley.
No, I was just going to say, I think absolutely the BBC has a role, and I think the Charter itself, in the way in which it frames some of that local regional production, so that it is actually genuinely rooted in those communities, rather than a kind of outpost where people travel from one area to another to work and it doesn't touch the local community. So, and I think the actual Charter and the way in which it's framed can help do that.
And just to come back, what Sarah brilliantly illustrated, the TV workshop was originally called, of course, the TV Central Workshop, and ITV Region paid for that, paid for people like Paddy Constantine, Samantha Morton, Shane Meadows to go somewhere for nothing. Michael Socker at the moment to lead in something. The BBC has to sort of step into that mantle. And I have these conversations in Wales. Rihanna, who was the controller, who was fantastic. I've said, you've almost got to be saying we need to take on kids who are of a certain class, gender, colour. You need to sort of have those almost sort of, positive things where we're going to take a kid from this media college in South Wales. You got to have those conversations. They've got to start doing it.
Thanks so much. Absolutely, that there is evidence.
Just real quickly, I have to say this, and slightly controversially, no one's going to argue against increased regional production. At the same time, 50% of Britain's black population lives in London, and unless we also have a commensurate effort to ensure that there is productions by black-led productions and proper employment of black and Asian and global majority people, you end up having a trade-off, which we have to avoid.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Thanks, Marcus. And I think, like all instances, people can be pushed toward trade-offs, and that's absolutely not what anybody wants at all. That we see it again and again and again in research. Often, brilliant schemes will actually, trade different diversity characteristics against each other for a certain number of places. So we're looking for that balance. We're looking for genuine regional ecosystems, but it's not just about it's not just about region. You've rightly made a point there, Marcus, about the importance of race and representation and black communities. And I think also one of the things that's important and comes through that policy briefing is sometimes we get regional production, but regional production without power, without genuine power, actually is churn. And that's not sustainable. That doesn't build the sort of really strong, brilliant ecosystem that we want for the future. Thank you. Have we, Anna, got a very, very short question? Bear in mind we have a whole 6 minutes left. If there's one more question, and we'll do some fairly quick fire answers, that would be wonderful.
Yes, we have a very short and to the point question. Should class become a protected characteristic under equality legislation?
Thank you so much, Anna. Would any of our panel members like to give a brief hotshot response?
I'd like to say yes, but it needs a decent measure, because I think the current measures are all just really naff.
Absolutely agree, and I would say though that sadly we've seen that being a protected characteristic doesn't help you get any work or representation in the industry. So it's a yes with the caveat that Sarah said, but it won't necessarily help with this issue, sadly.
Okay, mine is a maybe-ish, probably leaning against a no. I think it's actually really useful to be used as a prism to look at the other protected characteristics as opposed to being a protected characteristic in and of itself.
Yes,
Can
I think it
oh.
should be. I think it should be. It's still the greatest signifier of your life chances is your class.
Can I just say very briefly, I think if we're going to put effort into legislative change, then there are some things we could do to better support, to lobby government to make sure that freelancers are better supported, have more rights,
Yes.
and can survive through the financial precarity that they currently face.
Yeah,
Thank
universal
you.
basic income. We need to look at Ireland for sure.
Yeah. Also, how do you signify class? What a great question that is. I mean, my mate said to me the other day, is how you read your newspaper. He said, I know if somebody's working class, they read it from the back. They go to sport first.
No, that's gender, dear.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So who knows, isn't it?
Yeah, there's honestly there's such brilliant discussion points come out of this, and they're definitely things that we want to continue and take forward. Unfortunately, for now, I'm going to have to draw things to a close. I very, very much appreciate and want to thank our panelists for such thoughtful and generous contributions. Thank you all so much for joining us and for making this discussion what it has been. I also would really like to thank our specialist digital colleagues here at the University of Leeds. Scarlett and Adelina, thank you both so much for all your support with the digital back end today and behind the scenes. And I also want to thank Maria for her support with the impact questionnaire. Please don't forget the impact questionnaire. This is a reminder, finally, that the briefing can be downloaded from the project website. That is in the link. And we really, really hope to continue these conversations beyond today, beyond this policy briefing launch. Please do get in touch if you would like to discuss further. We would be delighted to. Thank you, everyone, for your time and support. And we will circulate the recording and follow up information from the event. But thank you, everyone, very, very much. I really, it's been fantastic to have such brilliant engagement. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Beth.
you so much.
Bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Beth.
everyone.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thanks
Take
now.
care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.